you know, all these different
Wait,
kind of
sorry.
Hi everyone, I'm Paris.
Hello, I'm Selena.
And we are
Love and Car.
So after a little break for Easter Sunday, we are back and a lot has happened over the last 48 hours. We have had the death of the Queen's husband, Prince Philip.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. And we've also had the death of DMX.
Rest in peace.
And DMX is known for just being one of the biggest, best-selling hip-hop artists in history.
Yeah.
Very influential. He's just known from here to Timbuktu. You know, before Drake was Drake, like DMX is probably...
Oh, they don't even belong in the same sentence. Sorry.
Well, Drake, if you're watching this, I don't agree with her. Put me on, bro. I can do a verse for you. But yeah, so with these sudden deaths of these cultural...
Icons.
Yeah, cultural icons and I guess cultural pillars even.
Well, I don't know. I guess it depends how these people, how much they influence your childhood or what age you are in terms of them being pillars. For instance, I don't think of Prince Philip as a pillar, I suppose because I was so young when he was actually being proactive and doing stuff, so like all his conservation or the, you know, the whole Duke of Edinburgh thing. I didn't grow up here, so I never really had that real connection to him as being a pillar. You kind of just heard a lot more about the Queen than you did him, and it was only kind of yesterday reading a bit more about what he did and things like that, that you actually realise, oh, this guy actually did a lot and did a lot for kids in this country in terms of sport, in terms of, as I said, conservation things for nature, for animals, climate change, etc. So he was quite forward thinking in that respect. So that's, I guess he was a pillar, and I almost have found that out too late, which is not great on my part. But I know he was kind of tainted with a bit of
controversy. So
yeah.
He was a complex individual. So I think like most people, you know, when people have legacies, they have the good things they did and they have the things that make them problematic. And I think we need to start normalising that as well, because that's just inevitable.
Yeah, it makes you human. No one's perfect, are they?
Yeah, so I mean, some people heal, but on the other hand, yes, sometimes, yes, they can cause hurt, okay. But that's just, you know, Prince Philip is not exempt to that. And I guess in DMX's situation, you know, the music, oftentimes it was soundtracks to a lot of people's lives. And I guess the hurt that, you know, he inflicted was maybe less well documented. But, you know, principally, you know, he comes from this kind of hyper-masculine hip-hop culture. And we know what classic hyper-masculine hip-hop culture is and what it can mean and what it can represent. Do you know what I mean?
I do feel though that although a lot of his songs were very hyper-masculine, and his tone in terms of how he rapped was very like in your face and very raw, and that was kind of his you know, sort of USP almost, wasn't it? But he did have kind of the softer songs that were a bit poetic, more vulnerable. So, you know, the whole I'm slipping, I'm falling, I can't get up. It was kind of like a cry for help almost. I don't know if that's what he meant by it or whatever, but that's kind of, that song was like, when I was younger, I'd listen to it when I was sad or struggling, you know. So,
oh yeah, for sure.
He definitely had an emotional aspect to his music as well. So I think he, you know, there's that duality there, even though he is this hyper-masculine man in his music.
Yeah, he's a man's man.
Still have feelings, right? So
still got feelings, yeah, and I guess he epitomises, you know, in some senses what people would call that toxic masculinity. In some senses, you know, I'm gonna put all my feelings into aggression or, you know, substance abuse. Do you know what I mean? Rather than being able to tackle the root cause. That's not DMX alone, right? He's just, I guess, a poster boy if you really look at why a lot of people are bought into him and identify with him, you know. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. I'm sure someone's, you know, some sort of scientist has already kind of said that somewhere. I mean, I remember DMX clowning Drake because Drake was all singing, and he didn't. So he had a very particular way that he felt that men should express themselves, and most men are rocking with that. Why? Yeah, I agree with you, DMX. A lot of the time when men don't agree with you, or as a man, they call you feminine. Certain types of expression, were called feminine, and people bought into that with Drake, for example. Oh, he's light skinned, so therefore he's feminine, and all these different.
Wait, sorry. Because a man is light skinned, they're seen as more effeminate. I think that's a problematic statement, if ever there was one.
That's been a trope, within the black community for ever.
What, the lighter skin you are, the more effeminate or what? I don't
sensitive
understand.
Or soft, yeah. And obviously, DMX played into that. But look, here's a beautiful thing.
Did he?
A little bit in terms of like, Drake is already under suspicion. He didn't necessarily say it like out and out, like colorism. But there's already like a side eye that you're getting if you're in a very hypermasculine hip hop space and you carry yourself in a certain way. That is all. Singing is not thumbs up within the hip hop community, especially if you're a rapper. Like 50 Cent used to get a Ja Rule for it, and so on and so forth.
I feel like you're mixing things up.
Yeah, but
being
culture is fluid.
Being a singer doesn't mean you're light skinned. Being light skinned doesn't mean that you're a singer.
That's definitely not what I said. It was the combination of things. But
okay.
Singing. No, I'm just saying. But you guys can rewind, and maybe you agree with Selena, maybe you agree with moi. But the point is, singing is especially if you're a rapper, it's not like thumbs up. That's how 50 Cent used to get at Ja Rule. Rule, baby. Sorry, I'm really going off on a tangent now. Now I am. Tangent alert. But so, the thing about it, you touched on it earlier. You said that you don't even know half of the things that Prince Philip did. Now, he died at 99 years old. The reason actually I don't know yet. Nobody really knows. But the point is, he had a long lifespan and a very full life in terms of he visited 142 countries, I believe. Set up all these initiatives. Wasn't stuck in an office in a traditional sense, so he could kind of maximize his human potential and apply it to all these different arenas. Do you know what I mean?
Well, he had access to it.
Yeah,
He almost had the greatest kind of role in that he could kind of take the back seat a little bit because he isn't or wasn't rather king. But he still had a sort of sphere of influence because he was the husband of the Queen. So he could do things because he had that influence. But then he could also kind of cut through the bureaucracy because of his hierarchy almost. So it's like, I think he had a good sort of station to make things happen. But not have to deal with so much, I suppose, of the public faff that the Queen had to deal with, maybe, or have less focus on him versus the Queen. I don't know. I mean, obviously he had a lot of PR stuff he had to do, but I just think the focus is very much on the Queen.
Well, yeah, he traditionally, people who married the monarch, from his stance, right, they wouldn't have a role. He actually made that role, and made it a lot of work and made it a very impactful role. So he literally designed the role from the ground up. So originally he was designed to for people in his position, I think they call him the consort.
Yeah.
They're designed to just be in the background and just chill, basically. But, he wanted to be a husband to Queen and make stuff happen. And make stuff happen he did. And yes, he was given a platform, but it was a platform, and then he took off from there.
Yeah, he used it in a good way, right? He didn't just use it to enjoy the privileges of it. He actually used it to have some sort of impact, I suppose. So, as I said earlier, he created all these sports schemes, WWF.
Founded it.
Yeah, so...
I didn't know that, until he died.
He tried, man. He tried, and maybe, I don't know, maybe because of all the good he did, you can kind of forgive his gaffes and his one-liners. I don't know.
I mean, look, okay, the reason why I'm saying he had a long life, he did all these things, is that now I have the privilege of maybe, documentaries or things like that coming out to do a biopic or like a film on what he did, you know what I mean? So it's almost like you are going to get appreciated that much more after death. That's just like a human thing almost.
Yeah, that always happens, and I find that quite sad. It's almost like your worth isn't realised until you die.
I think it's magnified when you die.
And
Actually, it's magnified.
it's also like it's praised when you die almost, because like I think of, I don't know, Whitney Houston, even Michael Jackson, like aside from all the controversy attached to them when they passed away, it was almost like a worldwide sort of grieving event, wasn't it? That it was, as you say, the same with Prince Philip, documentaries on every channel, you could watch the funeral, people were crying in the streets, flowers everywhere. Like, these are people that for all intents and purposes have touched people's lives through whatever facet. So for Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston, it was their art, their music,
Yeah, people know
their
who they
charisma.
are.
For Prince, all right. For Prince Philip, it was the impact he had from on a society. So yeah, I think it's beautiful in a way that people come together during death and celebrate someone, but it's also a little bit disappointing and macabre. You know, it's like, why can't you show this when people are alive as well, and praise them when they're alive?
I think people did. It just depends where you look. You know, it depends where you look. There would have been those people that are you know, praising Prince Philip, and I think traditionally when he was alive he didn't like all of that kind of spotlight, so we need to factor that in as well. And I think, you know, I'm just looking forward to, I guess, learning more about Prince Philip, because he was out of my radar. I knew him as a, you know, his later life in terms of, you know, the controversy of the gaffes, but something that you also touched on there, or maybe the, you know, the good can outweigh the bad. I don't think one outweighs the other. I think that they coexist. They exist in the same body. Do you know what I mean? They just do. And whilst this person might be good for the environment, they can be horrible for X, and so on and so forth. So I guess that's just the way I look at it. That's all. I think that
I think it depends on who you are. So for example, Jimmy Savile, I mean, he supposedly did good, all this charitable stuff, but the only reason he did that was to get to children and, you know, assault them.
He's a unique example.
That will never, nothing about him is good, or about what he did is good. I don't care, because it's tainted with all this, you know, abuse of children, and he actively covered it up, and people actively covered it up for him, out of fear and for financial gain. So, like, yeah, I think they're different examples, aren't there? And I guess maybe that's what I was saying. This guy actually, is there anything that bad about Prince Philip that would, you know, eradicate all the good he did?
Jimmy Savile is a unique example, in my opinion, like in terms of someone that got a knighthood but was really using the good he was doing as a mask. You know, do you know what I mean? I don't think
people like that. Max Clifford. I mean, if you want to
know who that is, who's that?
That PR guy.
I mean, come on now. I mean,
yeah, but he was a big guy.
What good did he do though? Sorry, PR. So he's known for PR. So it's not exactly.
Well, no, but he's not dead. Is he dead? I can't remember.
I'm sorry, Selena. This won't work.
All right, cut it out.
No, as in no. I'm not cutting it out. We can leave it in. But I'm saying your example doesn't ultimately work, which is fine. We can come back to another episode and, you know, pick this up if you want to. But,
no, I'm all right. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Well, no, it's up to you. So the point is, you want to have the last word? No, I'm going to shake my head. Yeah. So, you know, the point is, I don't think, except for that one example, you know, we use, because in that example, that guy was using good to mask the bad, whereas the Prince Philip or DMX, we're talking about whether they're good and bad, which exist in silos, as far as we can tell. One wasn't used to mask the other. You know, whether they can then face off and erase. I don't think so. That's just my perspective. Your perspective is that they can be, but yeah.
No, I just think some people have good, like, you can be someone who has the best intentions and still do or say stuff that isn't great, but, you know, overall, on aggregate, your intentions come through as good, and overall, I suppose your impact will be something that is good. You don't hurt other people to that extent that, let's say, someone like Jimmy Savile did. So that's my comparison. And I kind of said that about Prince Philip. I didn't say that about DMX. I don't think I know enough about his personal life to say that. I know he had a lot of struggles with drugs and he went to rehab multiple times. I don't think that makes anyone a bad person. In fact, he tried, you know, he went there and he tried to help himself. I know he was convicted of, you know, like some tax fraud here and there. Obviously that's not great. But I also know that in his music you could see an element of vulnerability. I know that he loved his kids and he was struggling. He was just a human, right? But
he owned his demons.
Yeah, he didn't try and hide it. He was even on YouTube with his son talking about his, you know, his drugs. So it's like, yeah, you can't. I don't think you can compare apples with oranges.
I think okay. So I mean, if we look at the George Floyd trial that's happening right now, you know, the fact that George Floyd was a convicted criminal, you know, and he had also potentially taken drugs at some point, you know, that is actually one of the main defenses that, you know, the state or the police are using, or sorry, the ex-policeman is using, you know, to defend themselves. You know what I mean? So your character...
But that's ridiculous, because
he
didn't die because he took something,
or he was a criminal. But the point is,
he died purely because someone was on his neck. Like that's the factor that killed him.
But yes,
the drug.
But or the fact he was a criminal. But the point is, those things are still thrust in everybody's faces. So yes, I agree that someone's misdemeanors, legal or not, shouldn't outweigh or overshadow. But in reality, in some people's eyes, they do. You know, Jay-Z is still introduced as an ex-drug dealer, even though we know he's way more than that.
Even now?
In the media, sometimes, correct. And the media basically represents the popular narrative. You know, you've got people who are at the epicenter of hip-hop culture who understand, and people who are on the outskirts who don't give a monkeys. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, if I was to say to you, who's Bruiser? You know, the Grime MC.
Don't know.
Exactly. Bruiser is a Grime MC from the UK.
Sounds like something out of Mario Kart. Bowser, that's what I think of.
Yeah, and then trust me, there's other people around the world where you say, do you know who Jay-Z? No, I mean, you know, I doubt Prince Philip even knows who he is. But going off on tangents, you know, the point is, some people are gonna use people's flaws to dehumanize them completely. It exists on the spectrum, and there are extreme examples. But generally speaking, everyone's got flaws or things that, you know, they had to work on.
Yes, but I do think some people's flaws outweigh other people's flaws. For instance,
can't weigh up next people's
like
flaws.
Epstein? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, okay, yeah, I agree. And obviously he felt like there was no way for him to defend himself. So he obviously took the route of taking his own life, right?
Well, that's what they say.
You know.
Some people believe other people got killed so as not to expose the darker secrets of the elite.
But Ghislaine knows the secrets too. I'm sure she does.
Yeah, and she's not talking, is she?
But she's alive. So anyway, anyway, look, we'll see what happens. But you know, she's alive. So in my opinion, I just feel like they would have tied up all the loose ends. You know what I mean? And she was like, she wasn't in a. Well, it's true. But anyway, so you know, something you also touched on, which is really the crux of this video, is, you know, how many people's lives these different cultural icons or pillars touched. And the reason why I use the word pillar is because these people who, you know, present themselves as coming from a certain background and representative of a certain time or a certain mentality, that ties in very deeply into the idea of who you are. Do you know what I mean? If you're someone growing up in Britain, that's what Prince Philip's existence equates to. And if you're someone that's black, you know, worldwide, or from a certain kind of community, you know, living in the West diaspora, DMX's existence speaks to a certain element of your identity. You know, the struggle, the rawness, the aggression. So
to an extent, I do think with music you can transcend those barriers. For instance, my father loves DMX, so obviously that's just a one-off, but I do think with music, whilst it may start in a certain genre or be more popular within a certain community, music does transcend quite a lot of barriers, and people who you don't expect to listen to it might listen to it and might be impacted by it or find that it's their voice, you know.
Okay, so
I think what I'm trying to say is I think he's affected the worldwide, as opposed to just perhaps certain pockets that you just mentioned.
yeah, I mean, you know, look, DMX has gone the top 15 slots in US iTunes, the top 15 are all DMX. I mean, I don't think it's not going to be your dad streaming him right now. It's not right now in his remembrance. That's my point. So the people whose lives that he touched, whose tear ducts he's going to sting, do you know what I'm saying? Those people, it comes from that identity thing. And DMX was so big, yes, he did transcend just that local hip hop community. He was not local, he was global. He was a massively selling artist.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Which I get, but the reason why we're having this episode is about, you know, people crying over someone they didn't know. I've seen people saying, I didn't even know, how can I even know DMX? How am I feeling like this? Almost like they're ashamed. This is, you know, hip hop artists, men that I'm seeing tweet this, and I think that's them kind of trapped in that box of how do I feel?
Why
you know,
should you
they're
be
reconciling.
ashamed for feeling sad?
They're not saying they're ashamed, but they're just kind of questioning it. They're positioning it to say that I didn't even know you. How could someone that I didn't even know have this effect on me? And it's, if you were just feeling what you're feeling, you wouldn't question it as such, you know what I mean? And then obviously they're probably following the mantra of, I'm hip hop, I don't just feel just because, you know, because when you feel something, it's not really, it has to be rationalized or, you know, put logic to it. You just feel, you just mourn. So crying over people, well, I've already kind of said my point and my position on it. People are crying over Prince Philip as well. You know, older people and some younger people as well, you know, who remember him more in his active years. But, you know, there are
people who have done Duke of Edinburgh. We watched an interview with this guy yesterday who did it when he was in jail, right? And he said it completely changed his life. He learned the skill of cooking and now he's a private chef. And it's sort of like people who you don't know this guy, but because of what you don't know this guy, but because of what he did, he had such an impact on your life. So of course you'll be sad or touched.
Cry.
And you know, I remember when Princess Diana died, and my mum and my aunts, they were all bawling, like, because they had this connection in terms of what she went through, and you know, people empathized and sympathized with her story and all this kind of stuff. So I do think you can find a connection with someone and their story or their music
or what they represent,
you know, and it can touch you, and there's nothing wrong with that. Surely that's like
the aim.
Yeah, we're all human. That's the whole point, to connect, you know, the milk of human kindness, the connection, what we all share together, our emotions, our vulnerabilities, and our ability to, you know, be there for each other and find that unity. I don't know, you know, it's...
Yeah, it is, but you know, I think, you know, obviously all those characters or factors you've explained, is that what's championed in hip-hop music or the community? I don't think so. Do you know what I mean? So therefore, all the people whose hearts he really touched and tear ducts, the people who look at him and think, yeah, he's representing me and the struggles that I'm going through, you know, they're not necessarily as willing to tap into that all those vulnerabilities, which make us human. But that's what that is. So, you know, it's been an interesting time in that respect. And yeah, overall, I'll say yes, it's normal to cry over people you don't know, because they tie into the idea of who we are. And if you feel like you identify with someone and there's a bit of them, then of course, you know, it's almost like a part of you's, you know, dying. You know, a light in the world that represented some of you is now less visible. And
it could be like a nostalgic thing. It's like this person reminds you of happy times in your childhood or sad times that their music got you through. You know, it's things like that. Even that can make you sad or feel that kind of loss, I suppose. You know, music does trigger emotional reactions. So I think it's that emotion, isn't it? And yeah, if you feel that way, you feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know DMX like that, but yeah, he's famous my whole life, and you know, I think it's almost like Ludacris. Ludacris used to project this larger than life character on the mic. I think DMX is higher than Ludacris though in icon status, but Ludacris is dope. But you know, Ludacris made a song, you know, album Chicken and Beer, you know, I'm gonna fight, you know, what you gonna do? Act the fool, you know, you can tell that he was influenced by DMX, and that was the way they want their emotions to come out, and that was all the music. That is what you were hearing in the music for the most part. You know, I don't think, rest his soul, you know, DMX probably laugh if you were like, oh yeah, I get emotional to your music, like you're saying, because it's...
Yeah, but it might not be a sad emotion, it might be a hype emotion, like, you know, X gonna give it to, you know, in a party.
Yeah, but don't call it
dance.
emotion, you know, call it a
but
reaction.
It is. It's a response, an emotional response. Happiness is an emotional response, or you know, like...
It is, but he's not supposed to call it. That's the thing about culture. It kind of carves things up, and there are certain rules.
Really, all these. That's not what that means, and this definition is what that. Just shut up. Just be who you are and feel what you feel. Tired of it. Sorry.
No, that's a good summary. You know, of where we're coming from. My sister, for example, I remember my sister crying over Aaliyah, my mum shedding tears over, you know, a rerun of the Princess Diana wedding. When she passed, and you know, but I don't. So I guess that was the first time I saw someone crying over someone they didn't know, and I, you know, kind of put my head to the side as a little kid, 4 or something, wondering what that was. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you didn't know them, and then yeah, now I get older, I realise, you know, you grow with these people, you identify with these people, and their light is your light, basically.
Oh, and they're just in and out of your life in terms of being what you see every day in the media, in terms of, you know, seeing someone who helped with charity, in terms of just seeing a young and talented person, in terms of Aaliyah, who had everything at her feet. Like, that's just sad. You crying in response to that might just be like crying for the loss of someone who was a, you know, bright star for all intents and purposes, someone who inspired people, someone who is talented, you know, beautiful girl, just gone too soon. Like, you might just be crying out of that.
I get that, but it's just like, it's almost like we only reserve these feelings for celebrities, or we're, you know, we're more willing to give these feelings for celebrities as opposed to our neighbour. Do you know what I mean? There are people who lost people in the pandemic, you know, 90 plus years old, but then the same people weeping for Prince Philip won't wear a mask or don't want to. Do you know what I mean? And obviously we know where that leads, but then where's your empathy for those kind of, you know what I'm saying? So it's a complicated picture. So
well,
maybe we can
people invest their emotions, isn't it?
Yeah, so maybe we can do an episode of, okay, this episode is about, you know, why do people cry over people they don't know? And maybe there's another episode where it's like, why do people not cry over people they should know and care about? Do you know what I mean? In terms of their neighbour.
It's just if you care about your neighbour or not, really. I mean, we watched a documentary on iPlayer about people talking about people who had died to them, their father-in-laws, their sons, etc. For me, that was extremely hard to watch, and it made me very sad. And I cried. I don't know these people from Adam, but I can see their loss, I can hear their voice, I can see their eyes glassing up. Do you know what I mean? So it's just, I suppose, how you respond to things like that. And
it's not you though, if it's a collective that seem to not care about normal person versus celebrities. It seems to be a societal thing.
Well, but how are you ever going to resolve that problem? You're not. That's down to the individual in terms of how much empathy they have for the next person in the room.
I think the society can influence that feeling of empathy.
To be honest, society shouldn't have to. People should be able to be kind and draw on a connection and realise that every life is worth, you know, something is worth people caring about. But unfortunately, that's... I guess everyone maybe doesn't have the capacity to care for everyone, otherwise you'd just always be sad about something, so people choose and prioritise their feelings. I don't know.
Yeah, along, you know, funny lines, very particular lines, you know, coincidental lines. It takes a village to raise a child, ultimately, you know. The reason why I was mentioning the fact that, you know, you said that, you know, you can list off different things that you've cried because of. I've got a very limited, as opposed to you, I've got a very limited list of people that I didn't know where their situation or their passing has caused me to shed tears. But my tear ducts have stung. I mean, you know, in recent times, in terms of George Floyd's funeral. And you know, you either get it or you don't get it. You get the emotional argument and why that's an emotive event, or you don't. So I don't need to really explain, and I don't need to transfer my feelings over there to you. You feel me?
No, because and no one needs to explain stuff like that.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing, that I'm in that space in life where I can feel what I feel and not have to feel like I need to justify it. But yeah, go on.
But I was just going to say, likewise, if someone doesn't cry, they don't have to explain that either. You don't know how they're feeling inside, and I guess if they're not feeling anything, I mean, who are we to judge? Well, someone
right? But it's one thing not crying, but another thing not understanding why it's sad, and I guess that's more what I'm leaning at. Yeah. I clearly understood why this was a sad situation, to the extent of me sitting over it and in the other end of the Atlantic, a world away from, you know, him and his family, still feeling that. Even versus people I know, so you know, that tear duct stinging, it has been more than, you know, some people I know, you know, and it's complicated for sure. I'm still progressing through it. Go on, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it's probably also the wider context of his death.
Oh, certainly.
That's something that you hold very dear to your heart in terms of, you know, championing against all these horrible racist things that exist in the world. But yeah, we've spoken about that in many other videos, so
yeah. So, you know, I will never say never. I could think about some people that have passed, like Prince, you know, Chadwick Boseman, who've done an episode on, actually, DMX, you know, anybody throughout history, you know, especially my living memory. I could think about them, I guess, another day and then maybe shed a tear, you know. But I think, you know, I just want to round off this episode and say that however you express yourself, it doesn't need an explanation. I think that sometimes, even in relationship contexts, when your partner's upset or expressing himself in a certain way where tears are involved, there's an instinct to want to know why. Do you know what I mean? Why are you crying? You know, correct me if I'm wrong. Where has this come from? And you know what, to an extent that has an answer, but sometimes there's part of it that doesn't, right? It's just
sometimes just a release, frustration, things building up. Might not just be one thing.
Exactly.
Best thing you can do for someone who's crying is just be there.
Just be there if they want to talk, you know. And yeah, just absorb, you know, and just listen. So yeah, that's my overall underlining thing. Don't feel like you need to explain why you're crying for someone you didn't know. Just feel, you know, just do what you need to do. And yeah, I mean, part of it is you've clearly identified with this person and they represent part of you out there. But then part of it doesn't really have an explanation, because that's the beauty of being human. We're lava lamps. So that's been Love Uncut. You know, the Why I Cry episode, and yeah, rest in peace to Prince Philip and the many other people who passed away on the same day, you know, as him worldwide, people whose names we don't know, but their families are feeling it all the same.
Oh yeah,
and DMX. Yeah,
Richard guy as well. It's really sad.
And
the recent, I think he was a 19-year-old that was found in Epping Forest. That's really sad too. He recently passed away, so that's another awful one. But look, yeah, as Paris said, there's so many names we don't know, and
people. Just
thinking of the extent of deaths daily worldwide is kind of overwhelming and harrowing. But I think it's just it's just being aware of that, being grateful for every moment we have, I suppose, together, and enjoying it, making the most of it, taking a break if you need, being productive the next moment. It's just making the most of life.
Yeah, and look, I have to say that, you know, death isn't the end of someone's story. You can recount their story, and you should celebrate their life. And you should continue to do that. So, you know, that's how I see death. basically. You know, aside from the emotion, how you express it, and the sad emotions, there's also celebration in there. There's also story and lessons that will live on.
Yeah.
Alright, people, so that's been Love Uncut. Thank you for checking in, especially those who made it to the end. Cheers, we see ya. And we'll be back next week at 6 o'clock. Peace.
Thanks, guys.